Hello and welcome to the Cube Talk Show. My name is Joe Barbieri, I'm your host, and with us tonight by popular demand, we have a returning guest, Mr. Jeff Good. He is the president and owner of Good World Consulting, and the topic tonight is charities in tough times. So Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm well, Joe, and thanks for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here.
So charities in tough times. Actually, before we get to that, if you want to just give us a bit of background about what you're doing now, I guess, because it's new.
Indeed, thank you. So as of about 6 months ago, founded an organization called Good World Consulting. You can visit the website at www.goodworldconsulting.ca. And basically, it's a simple extension of what I've been doing and how my career has evolved over the last 25 years. I've spent almost 20 years in the for-profit sector and have spent about the last 6 in the charitable world, working with organizations like Junior Achievement, the YMCA of Greater Toronto, and as of last fall, decided it was time to start something different and have now been consulting into the charitable and not-for-profit sector, really for the benefit of the organizations I'm working with. So real pleasure, and the response has been absolutely fabulous.
Well, that's good to know.
Thank you.
So this spans all sorts of charities, large, small.
Absolutely. So my services through Good World Consulting and some of the people I work with in collaboration include everything from fundraising support to strategic planning. I can help fill in interim assignments. There's an opportunity for me to do work around organizations that need marketing support. I draw on all those years of experience with for-profit organizations like Procter & Gamble and General Mills, and also the work that I've done in terms of fundraising and building organizations so that I can help charities, as you say, large and small. Doing some work right now with some clients around strategic planning. I've got some very exciting news that I can't share all the details with around some funding announcements that'll be coming up shortly for one of my clients. Doing some work as well, helping organizations on the real estate side. Obviously, as we're going to talk in a minute, it's critically important for organizations that are trying to manage their costs to have the ability to control all of their expense lines. Real estate is one of them. So I'm affiliated with a brokerage known as Cressa Partners, a large international organization. And Cressa Partners works strictly on the client side to ensure that their clients have the best support possible. And that's perfect for charitable organizations.
Okay, that's a lot of information. So so charities in tough times. So what do you mean by that, I guess, to start with?
Right. Well, the last time we met, we talked a little bit about the various dynamics at play in the charitable sector and where your money goes when you make a gift. I think today, if we focus on what's been happening courtesy of the economy and frankly changes on the government side that are having a really interesting effect in how charities are managing their revenues, how they're trying to find new monies, and most importantly, what they're doing when they're not finding the revenues that they're seeking. That's really what's been going on. The economy is still soft. There's certainly been conversation about, and I'm not some market prognosticator, but there's been some conversation about double-dip recessions, maybe even a depression. So if that's the case, charities are going to be very much front and center in both dealing with the fallout and having to manage their finances to respond.
So, well, we'll start with the economy then. So what are you seeing in the last year, for example, that charities are doing differently?
Right. Well, let's talk first about the economy and then how the charities have responded, because that's really the charitable response is where I think your viewers will find the most interest. In terms of the economy, there have been a couple of sort of macro effects at play. The first one is that obviously with a soft economy, it means both businesses and individual donors have been watching their pocketbooks, watching their own bottom lines. That makes it harder for charities to fundraise from those two revenue sources. The other revenue source that is seeing both currently and is certainly anticipated to see significant change is on the government funding side. Now let's not forget, there are well over 150,000 not-for-profits in Canada and over 80,000 charities. That means there are a lot of different organizations, some admittedly very, very small, but who are trying to ensure that they've got enough money to keep the lights on next year, next month, in some cases even next week. The government is, in many cases, a provider to organizations. You've got the federal level of funding, you've got provincial levels of funding, and frankly, you've got municipal funding. The City of Toronto right now is having rather heated debates about the value of funding all sorts of different organizations. And I don't know that we should take the whole show to talk about that, but that is a very real and current example of where decisions made at the municipal and council level are going to have direct implications to the charities and the tens of thousands of people that those charities support. So when government makes decisions about funding, it has direct implications to charities that are relying on those funds and where they might look to make up those gaps.
Now, the City of Toronto has been in the news quite a bit lately. Have you noticed other cities doing this sort of thing, cutting back, talking about it? I know from people I talk to, they've been cutting in other areas, so I have a feeling it's not just Toronto.
No, it's not just Toronto, and it's interesting. It's a sign of the broader economy. Canadian cities, and again, we're a little off topic, but it's an area of interest for me. Canadian cities, because they really are a artifact of the provinces, have no real powers. Their ability to raise taxes is strictly based on their property tax base. So because there's so limited funding revenues for the cities, it has the flow-through effect of limiting their ability right across the country to support what might be very good charities. Now, in fairness, various municipalities have approached it somewhat differently. Calgary, for instance, has elected, right around the same time as Mayor Ford was elected here in Toronto, has elected a young, vibrant, and some would argue very progressive mayor. So they are having very different conversations about how to grow and how to make their city better, as opposed to what to cut and what needs to be ripped out in order to make the budget balance.
Okay, so given that economic background, so what are the charities, what is their strategy now in terms of response?
Right. So there isn't a single strategy. And given the great number of charities, it goes without saying there are as many different strategies as there are organizations. But I'd like to talk about a few different core themes, if I might. In our last conversation, we talked a fair bit about business models and how efficiency was being sought within charities and how they were trying to replicate the kind of models that many businesses do. So, for example, I'll highlight two ways within this idea of efficiencies. One of them falls under what I'll call a merger bucket. Mergers can take a variety of different forms, both in the for-profit and in the charitable sector. I'm intimately familiar with a couple of different mergers that illustrate this. The first one is where there are like charities or charities that have significant overlap, and they simply fold together. A merger of equals, a merger that frankly tries to find the best of both organizations, or in one case that I'm quite familiar with, tries to find something that's actually even better than simply 1 + 1. We've talked about the idea of 1 + 1 = 3 in that model. So yes, there are some cost efficiencies, but what it really is all about in the long run is actually trying to do something even bigger and better. So the savings, if I can put on my for-profit hat for a second, come from efficiencies on the marketing side. For example, you're not spending money competing with another charitable organization in order to try and drum up donations or clients. You can actually do that under one name, under one brand. So that makes for a lot of efficiencies. And obviously, like the for-profit model, there are some modest efficiencies on the people side of things. And that's a shame. I'm not somebody who is ever happy and certainly not seeking to have people out of work. But the fact is you don't need that many CEOs and you don't need that many CFOs when you merge two organizations, whether they're charities or for-profit organizations. So that's one model. The other one that I would talk about in terms of efficiencies that the for-profit world looks at is something that's rather more challenging on certain levels, is certainly something, and we'll talk about this in a second, presents unique challenges in the charitable world, but that has to do with flattening. So many charities, particularly charities that have evolved from the grassroots up, have a variety of levels or layers. And I don't just mean hierarchical layers, I mean layers in terms of perhaps something that's municipal or local or regional in nature. Then there might be a middle layer that's provincial or super regional. And oftentimes there's a national level. And each and every one of those layers, except for the national, would have multiple offices, multiple locations, and is going to have a variety of different systems and staff at each of those different organizations. So the case can readily be made to try and smush those together, flatten the organization. It's a challenge. You're dealing with history, you're dealing with territorial concerns and legitimate concerns about relationships with donors and partner organizations that have been established over years or decades, and in some cases even centuries. That said, the benefits are pretty clear. So what happens then is that boards get interested, or perhaps staff gets interested in trying to find those efficiencies. Even within those groups, there can be resistance. Staff, for very obvious reasons, about concerns about their jobs. But what also comes up is a dynamic at the board level. Boards are charged by law with looking over and having oversight for the fiduciary aspects of the charity for which they are directors. They're also responsible on a variety of levels for the management. They are responsible for dictating the management of the CEO and setting out the objectives for the organization. Here's where that can be a challenge. Some board members have those best interests absolutely at heart. Frankly, the vast majority do. But I think some board members are there because it looks good on a resume. Or some board members may be there because they deeply, deeply believe in the cause. They've been perhaps personally affected. Maybe they've lost a family member to a particular disease or to that cause. That means that while they care passionately, changing that organization may make them very, very nervous because they put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears as a volunteer into that organization. It can make them resistant for very personal reasons to change. I'm aware of at least one fairly large national health charity that has recently done just that work. And it took a lot of work, a lot of courage, some great leadership, and a lot of passion to make it happen. And I'm absolutely fascinated to see how it's going to play out, because I think that this organization is being watched very closely by a variety of other large national organizations. And if this organization can see it through over the next year to 18 months, I would not be at all shocked if a variety of other organizations seek to emulate what's going on there. I'm being a little coy about the name of the organization because I think, in fairness, they want to be cautious about this and not make too much noise. But it is an absolutely great exercise, and I'm very excited to see how it plays out.
Now, you mentioned a merger of equals as the first option. Have you seen any mergers of unequals, or 60-40s, or one just takes over the other one?
Right. Yeah,
the way the private sector does, because equals are pretty hard to find. At least, yeah, I'd say they're pretty hard to find. There's always somebody that's got a little bit more assets, power, membership, whatever.
Right.
Is this something you're seeing, and is the dynamics different, or?
Yeah, it's a great question. I can give a couple of examples, and they don't tend, in my experience, to follow the for-profit model, because there isn't the ability, as you've just indicated, to go in and purchase a charity. Sadly, what often happens is that a charity will fail, and that vacancy will be filled there may be an opportunity for staff members to come on. They might be hired by the entity that wants to grow into that area. I'm familiar with a situation that happened, frankly, at Junior Achievement, where there were vacant territories that were being unserved, and the organization that I was leading looked at how could we expand into those territories to serve them. Because at the end of the day, what motivates the charity is not the for-profit model. It's about the mission. And whatever we say today, we should not forget that cornerstone of what drives the charitable sector. There are situations where it may be 60-40. I'm involved right now with a merger that's going on, and there was a lot of due diligence done in terms of looking at the books. And of course there are differences. There are different strengths and different motivations for coming together. But in the end, maybe one was 60 and the other was 40 in one area, but the other was 40 and 60 in another. So no, it's not easy to find equals, but oftentimes there are countervailing weights that make it fair in the long run. But I think charities are looking beyond right now some of just the pure nuts and bolts as they seek some of that critical mass that enables for-profit organizations to survive tough times. I have certainly written in my blog and have a sense that it's going to get really tough on charities that are above a certain size. For instance, if you're running a charity out of your basement and you have no salary costs because you're running the local hockey group or the hockey team, but you have a charitable number so that people can make donations to buy youth their hockey gear, that's fine. You're going to survive no matter what. And the very biggest organizations, some of the largest names that we all know, they're going to survive. They're very efficient. They're very effective. They have large marketing organizations. And frankly, they have coffers to fall back on if times get tough. It's that middle ground where I think we're going to see some fallout, particularly at the lower end of the middle ground. So I'm talking about organizations that are $300,000 to maybe $1 million or $2 million in revenue. Those are the ones where they're often living hand to mouth. They often have very little or no reserves. And in my humble estimation, where a lot of really good work happens, these are organizations that know best what's happening kind of on the street. And they are the organizations that when a cut comes from the government or when a particular donor simply says, I can't do it this year, they're the ones often that simply can't make payroll. So they're the ones that are looking for partners, that are seeking synergies. And we're going to talk in a minute. I've got some other things I'd want to talk about in terms of how are they creatively trying to address those revenue challenges.
Okay, well, my next question probably will lead into that, but so again on the merger topic, are you finding people doing strategic, like complementary type part agreements, or say somebody has a good brand, someone else has a good infrastructure, someone else has IT, so they exchange and say, my brand isn't that known, but yours is, but I have the systems that are very effective, so you can use that, and we'll swap. Sort of like creative mergers, I guess you could say. Is this something you're seeing that, I'm assuming it's happening at some level, but is it common, or is it...
I would hesitate to call it common. What we're beginning to see is organizations reaching out, and it's actually really fascinating to see how it's coming together. I'll give you some examples. The City of Toronto, and more importantly, the Toronto District School Board, has surplus properties. Right? There are schools that are either vacant or tremendously underutilized. The TDSB and other school boards have been quite progressive in seeking partnerships and trying to figure out ways to use these properties. Meanwhile, charities, as I've indicated, are hungry for partnerships. So I'm familiar with one organization that I'm doing some work with that's seeking to find ways to perhaps use city TDSB properties. Boys and Girls Club, as another example, which is a name many people know because they're right across the city, and many of those are located in either school properties or where they have a partnership with the city to use spaces that otherwise might go unused. Now, I would offer a word of caution. What's interesting is as the city looks at cutting various programs, it is putting at risk some of these programs which have been in those spaces for a long while. Because, for example, if the city is doing the maintenance on these properties, but that gets cut, it's up to the charity to find that funding, because obviously you need air conditioning and you need heating. So it is a real issue. But those are examples of already existing partnerships. A lot of creativity is going in right now to partnerships. You've described infrastructure. That's part of it. But in many cases, it's actually trying to find where there can be synergies on the program side. Again, charities are all about their mission. So organizations are looking at ways that they can link up to create new partnerships. I'm working on something right now that involves 3 separate charities coming together to deliver something that will be very helpful to youth in the downtown core. What we are excited about is, yeah, it's a lot of work, and yes, it requires a fair bit of trust, but not only can it have a great impact for our mission, but because corporate funders are looking for that sort of innovation, we believe it's going to give us a leg up when we put together the package to go to conceivably one of the banks, one of the other large corporations, and say, this is an exciting innovation, maybe you'd like to fund it. Because there is money out there, it's how to find it and how to stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think you've answered this, but I'm going to dig into it some more. If there's 2 related charities, but they're not the same, so say one does youth education and another one does finding a home for youth. So they're both youth related, but they're different. Are you finding them coming together and saying, yes, we have the same people we're serving, but we do different things. Let's team up. And we can keep both our missions, yet work together because we're both serving the same youth. And so are you seeing that?
Right. The easiest organizations to partner with are exactly that share that mission. So I talked earlier about the example of a merger that I'm familiar with where the missions were virtually identical. Makes life pretty easy, and it begins the conversation on a level playing field. Where it's interesting, where organizations are beginning to come together, is where they're quite different in their focus. So, for example, this tripartite model that I'm describing, this example involves an organization dealing with people at the latter stages of their lives, seniors, people who have terminal illness, and so forth. It involves another organization that deals with mindfulness and helping youth and people of all walks of life be aware and build their internal resources. And a third organization that does deal with youth in a particularly disadvantaged and underserved community. You wouldn't necessarily think those 3 would be able to find common ground. But we've found a space that addresses an area of interest in all 3, addresses strengths for all 3 organizations, and we're going to make it happen. So the short answer to your question is no, it's not common. It takes a lot of work. It takes actually being aware of what other organizations are trying to do. But given the urgency of what's facing charities right now, we're seeing some of it, and I offer that it's a trend that is increasing.
Okay. We're going to continue talking about this very soon. We'll just take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back very soon.
They don't know of the lamps that hide my tears. They sigh, write a joyful tune. They say, why not? It's the month of June. I don't mind it, I don't mind it. I just want my life to match with the weight of what you say. All these words will have to change. We're gonna write this happy tune. It's summer and my birthday with my friends. We're gonna write this happy tune. It's summer and my birthday till the end. Instead of sad, I'll be bright. Instead of dark, I'll be light. I'll try to write a happy tune. What the heck? It's the month of June. I guess it's time we jump over the moon. We're gonna write this happy tune. It's summer and my birthday with my friends. We're gonna write this happy tune. It's summer and my birthday till the end. We're gonna write this happy tune. Can I forget my fears? Will it work out in the end? La 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 la. Let's go searching, see what we can find. You can call this place sunset, but I think it's strawberry light. And I'm so happy to see you smile.
Okay, we're back on the Cube Talk Show with Jeff Good, and we're talking about charities, funding in hard times. We were talking about a series of models, how charities are coping with less funding. So we were talking about mergers, different types of mergers, different models. Is there anything in that area that we need to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
I'd touch on one other aspect that I think is rather interesting. I mean, charities by their very definition are lean and seek to be efficient because they're focused on their mission. One of the areas that's been really neat and has been growing in the last little while is actually on the back of house side. So I talked about some of the consulting I do in the real estate realm in terms of helping organizations and charities get the best deal and understand what they need. Another model is simply to have a shared space. So there are a couple of different places that are doing that right now. The Center for Social Innovation here in Toronto is doing some really neat work in terms of shared space, communal space almost, for charities and not-for-profit organizations. It reduces a lot of cost in terms of how many receptionists do you need for one forward-facing organization that is answering the calls for all of the charities that are sharing that space. The other option is something along the lines of 401 Richmond, which is, again, a space geared, in this case, predominantly to the arts, but not exclusively, in terms of keeping the rents low, but creating a space that's friendly for the charities and organizations that operate there. So they are interested in ensuring that like-minded people are together, and it creates a bit of a bubbling, a melding of ideas and opportunities. I don't have any concrete examples, but I'm confident that when you get groups together, like at the Center for Social Innovation, the next thing you know, they are, as you asked before the break, coming up with really neat ways to further their missions because they're working next door to someone who's doing either something similar or it spurs an idea for them to come together.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was already happening, so that's pretty good. So along the line of efficiencies or expenses, so I guess the real estate you've touched on now. So is there anything else that's happening that's new? That's any new trends that you're seeing?
I don't know if it's new or a trend, but I will offer one other thought in terms of efficiencies and that sort of getting advice. I'm seeing a lot of really good work and a lot of exciting thinking going on within the for-profit sector about how the for-profit sector can best support the charities. So we'll talk in a minute about how charities are leveraging that to increase their top line and help their revenues. But the other aspect is that in the same way that organizations like PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, or Deloitte offers really good advice to the for-profit world, they offer advice as well to the charitable sector, often on a pro bono basis. These organizations are leveraging the talent that exists within their organizations and going out and doing that kind of consulting work. So I've been involved personally with two different opportunities for really bright people to come from these for-profit consultancies, do projects that have delivered hundreds of thousands of dollars of value. So that's not new, but I'm seeing an increasing focus on it, in part driven by their employees. These organizations are seeking to attract young people to join their organizations. There's competition for this talent, and they want to be able to look these new young employees in the eye and say, with all honesty, that they do more than just consult with big other corporations. They're helping out make a difference in the world, and that's pretty alluring to that new Gen Y or generation that's coming through. The other part that's really neat about what they're doing is they're changing the focus, and I read recently in a blog from one of the folks at PricewaterhouseCoopers talking about the fact that there has been perhaps a somewhat paternalistic tone that, we know best, we can help you, and we'll come in and perhaps solve some of your problems. And that hasn't been my personal experience, but I can see how it could be the case. And we talked last time we met about this idea that sometimes for-profit ideas get mistranslated when they get applied to the charitable sector. So what this individual was making a point in their blog was that I think increasingly there's a sensitivity to where the two can come together, that instead of being a consultant coming in and solving your problems, it's about coming together and really seeking to understand and to dive deeply into the needs of the charity, and that the charity has some insights to share, that there may be learnings both ways, and that influences the nature of the feedback and the nature of the advice that gets given. So I think that's a shift that we're seeing is a increasingly collaborative and more partner-based style of consultancy.
Very interesting. So, well, we've covered a lot of expenditures. So what about the other side, the revenue, money-making side? Are you seeing anything different there that the charities are thinking about that they haven't thought of before?
I think it's a matter of degree. I'll give you two examples, one of which I'd like to spend some time on. Certainly, charities have been very attuned to leveraging the power of social media. And I think certainly a sort of a hot theme, a hot topic, even 2 or 3 years ago, would have been Web 2.0 and Web 3.0 and all of that. And that's not going to go away, and it's a perfectly valid way for charities and, of course, other organizations to be increasing their reach, to be talking to new prospects and staying connected to their donors and getting their message about their mission out in a more impactful way. It's very cost efficient. So that's one that's not going to go away, and we're seeing that as an ongoing sort of growth area within the charitable sector. The other area, again, that's not particularly new but is absolutely exploding is the concept of social enterprise or social entrepreneurship. So let me, if I may, provide a model for this. If there's a spectrum that runs at one end from a purely for-profit organization, and a spectrum at the other end that includes a charity that is simply existing on donated funds, Somewhere in between, there's a middle ground. And there are shades of gray. So perhaps for your viewers, if I may, let me give some examples of what that might look like. At the donations end of things is something that might look one step away, a little bit about fee for service, particularly a sliding scale. So based on your ability to pay, we would like you to be able to participate in our programs. And there are charities big and small using that model. A great example that many of your viewers will be familiar with is the YMCA. The YMCA is a charity. And the YMCA is a charity in large part because it is open to everyone, regardless of ability to pay. You're expected to pay, for instance, if you join as a health, fitness, and recreation member, based on your ability to pay. It may be $5 a month, it may be the full fee. But within the YMCA of Greater Toronto, if memory serves, and this number may have changed since I last spoke with the team there, but something in the neighborhood of a third of their memberships at their health, fitness, and recreation centers are subsidized in some way. That's this model of fee for service. But that's a big one. There are small ones I'm familiar with. There's an organization that works in Regent Park, and it's the Regent Park School of Music. They use exactly the same model, but I assure you, they're not a $400 million organization. So that's an example of it in a small scale. As you move more towards the sort of the for-profit side, but still within the donation world, is something I want to talk more about, which is social enterprise. And this is this idea of charities and charitable organizations figuring out ways, in effect, to raise money. And we'll talk more about that in a second. Continuing on that scale is a socially responsible business. So now we're in the for-profit realm. But here's an organization that is perhaps giving some or the vast majority of their profits to charitable organizations. But it is run on a for-profit model, and they are giving the majority of their proceeds, their profits, to a charity. That's what differentiates it from a charity. They don't have a charitable number. They're a for-profit organization for the purposes of supporting charities. An example of that might be an organization that has a business model. So, for example, Habitat for Humanity, great organization. Habitat runs something called Restore.
Yeah.
They sell leftover and surplus building materials. They keep their costs very low, therefore the profits are good, and those profits go directly to support Habitat for Humanity. You may have heard of an organization called Me to We. I think I've got that right. But Me to We actually helps support the Kielburgers charity, Free the Children. Another example of how that's been socially responsible businesses helping the charities. As you move further along that continuum, the next signpost would be CSR, corporate social responsibility. And of course, there are 1,000 shades of gray. But basically what that talks about, and I alluded to this earlier, is organizations that are donating time, money, or talent to charities. Many organizations, large and small, are very generous and actually have policies that stipulate how they're going to operate, to what kind of charities they'll give, and how much they'll give to. And we could spend an entire show just talking about corporate social responsibility. And then at the far end of that spectrum is an organization that is strictly for profit. And I'm not by any means demeaning those organizations. Read recently a really passionate defense of organizations that are strictly for profit on a variety of fronts, but made one particularly compelling point for me, which is this. If that organization is growing and employing people, those people are making money and paying taxes and conceivably making donations of their own. So that for-profit organization indirectly is helping the charitable sector and those who need it. So I'm not by any means casting aspersions or suggesting one end of the spectrum is necessarily better than the other. Okay? So that's the spectrum. Let me pause there and see if you want to guide that further in terms of where we go next.
Well, maybe work in the middle of that spectrum. I think the two ends are pretty, I think they're pretty well known, but the middle ones are a little more innovative and mixed, I guess. So if you could start in there with
Great.
the social entrepreneurs and then further towards the profit.
Happy to do so. So let's talk about social entrepreneurship, and let me give you, if I might, some examples I'm quite familiar with. And I want to talk a little bit about not only the pros to doing that, but quite honestly, some of the cons and some of the risks to pursuing this path perhaps too ardently. So first and foremost, I think social entrepreneurship is a great idea. And what it really talks about is charitable organizations leveraging their strengths and talents, the things that they do best, in a way that allows them to raise money. So this isn't about having a gala dinner or a golf tournament. An organization that I'm quite familiar with called You for Change is at the incubation stage of doing some work using the youth that they are working with from predominantly the St. Jamestown community, giving them real life, real world experience, and actually having them build their resumes in a way that in the end can generate profits for, if I can use that term loosely, generate revenue for You for Change. So, concrete example, whether You for Change is working with youth in street art and graffiti art, and you'd say, how does that make money? But I'll explain that in a second. To using the skills and talents of these youth in terms of their interest in building websites and graphic design, you can begin to see how that might be something that people from the community or potential clients would pay money to have a website designed. I can speak from personal experience on the front, and when you visit my website, you will see the fruits of some of those labors. But let's talk, for instance, about something that's a little off the beaten track. You might say, wow, graffiti art, that's how does that fit into it? Well, the fact is despite the fact that the city has been spending money painting over some art that was already commissioned, there is still a desire on the parts of some parts of the city to have artwork in community spaces. So the rail lines have large concrete abutments that allow cutting to go on. There are contracts available to beautify those spaces, and the youth are thrilled to have the ability to exercise their talents and showcase the beautiful work that they can do. That generates revenue through a contract, which not only helps the youth, but helps the charity. So those are two great examples of how organizations are leveraging social entrepreneurship. But it doesn't stop there. Many organizations are using talents that span everything from the talents of seniors to business advice. So imagine youth going in and providing advice and insights to organizations on how to best connect with youth and what social media they're interested in. Those are all things that charities are looking at, and frankly that I'm helping advise on in terms of ways to make that work. It's something that is not to be undertaken lightly. It can be distracting from the mission. It needs to be a natural extension of the organization. So if you're working with seniors, probably having them doing, unless they're particularly talented and skilled on this front, having them do work on the IT front might not always be the best front, because in my experience, many seniors are not as tech savvy as the younger generations. No insult to my parents or my grandparents, but it's true. So I think that there needs to be a natural fit. Long story short, though, it is a way to prudently explore increasing revenues. There was a survey done not too long ago that said that at least to the respondents of the survey, north of 60% of the respondents had at least 10% of their revenue coming through social entrepreneurship. So, not a huge part, but many of the charitable sector are looking at this as a way to help increase revenue.
Okay, so what about those, is it CSR you called it? Or, yeah, CSR, and there was another.
Yep. We love our acronyms in the charitable sector.
Yes.
CSR is corporate social responsibility, and then there's socially responsible businesses.
Okay, well, maybe expand on both of those.
Absolutely.
The socially responsible business, I was actually part of that when I was working, because I was one of the people going out and giving the talent. They'd give a day and say, they'd send 20 of us to a organization and say, do this work for a day, and it was paid by the company because it was a work day. And this was quite a while ago, but I'm thinking that fits in that bucket, and I think they still do it. So I've seen that in my experience, but there's probably a lot of versions of that are out there.
Right.
Would you say that?
I absolutely would, and frankly, right across the country, Canada is blessed with all sorts of for-profit organizations that roll up their sleeves in innumerable ways to make a difference directly in their communities. It might be their own park cleanup, through to, as you've indicated, organizations that are helping charities directly. One of the organizations that I think many of your viewers will be familiar with is United Way. And we're right in the middle of the fall United Way campaign, where United Ways partner up with businesses right across the country in terms of raising money. And within those for-profit organizations, large and small, they're doing toonie days and giving generously from their own pockets. They are writing checks and having payroll deductions made. That's one example of corporate social responsibility, and it's guided through the great work that the United Ways do. Another example is where organizations, in effect, seize the reins on their own hands, and they may say, listen, United Way is going to be part of what we're doing, but they map out their own strategy. And you've alluded to the idea of, gee, we're going to give our employees a day a year where they can do whatever they want. It may be that organizations give a percentage of their profits, either before or after tax. Many of Canada's largest corporations, I'm thinking here of banks and so forth, have very formal and robust CSR policies. But what I would focus your attention in is the range here. You don't have to have a detailed plan or policy, and frankly, it gives people a real sense of satisfaction to give back in whatever way they choose. A friend of mine by the name of Sarah Saso, who works at Manulife, has done a variety of studies that show that there are benefits accruing back to the corporation for doing this kind of work in terms of employee morale, in terms of employee retention, in terms of attractiveness, as we said earlier, to new employees to join the organization. So there is very clearly a mutual benefit to a robust corporate social responsibility policy, and thinking critically about how best to support those who need it most, while at the same time doing well. The phrase I've heard is doing well by doing good. And I don't have a problem with that at all.
Yep, that's very good. So we have about 7 minutes or so. If people want to contact you for your services or for information, what contact information can you provide?
Let me give you a couple of easy ways to get in touch with me. One of the best ways, is to send me an email. You can reach me through Good World Consulting at Jeff, Jeff, at goodworld, as in it's a good world.ca. And I clear those on a regular basis and would be happy to chat to any of your viewers that are interested. People can phone me. I'm often in meetings or working with clients, but certainly I respond to messages as rapidly as possible. My cell phone, 416-807-8200, and would welcome calls and queries at that number. And I have both a blog and another way to reach me, frankly, would be to follow my Twitter account. As with the rest of all my names, you can reach me, you can follow me at Good World Guy. So I'm a Good World Guy, and you can follow me on Twitter.
So there's no spaces, just Good World Guy.
Good World Guy.
Just the way it sounds.
Exactly.
And the blog, is that...
You're going to forgive me, I should know this off by heart, but it's blogspot.com. And I seem to recall, I should have written this down in advance, shame on me, that it was Good World Conversations. Certainly if you Google Blogspot and Good World Conversations, all one word, that should get you to my blog. And I've blogged at length, extensively, I hope would be a better word, about the topics we're discussing and many other topics that are of interest to people who particularly might be considering the move from the for-profit sector to the charitable world like I did.
So for individuals and for companies as well who want consulting on
Any of the
these
topics we've talked on today, I'd be happy to chat further. Absolutely.
Okay, that's very good. And so that's our show for today. And to see the show in the archives, it's on thatchannel.com under past shows. And if you scroll down to about the middle of that page, you'll see my banner, The Cube Talk Show. And you can see all the past shows there. Also, they're on my website, www.joetheinvestor.ca, under the Cube Talk Show tab. And to contact me, my email is joetheinvestor.today@gmail.com, and that's also on my website. And a new feature on my website, which has just been added, up and coming guests. So I have an October and a November guest, so you can see that on my website as well. And that's all for now, and have a good evening. Thanks for watching.
My future then seemed dim, like withered leaves of a branch that's been broke. I looked in the milk glass future, and what I saw little switch, a little swoon. You just jumped over the moon, but your paper trail fell through. Now it's all up to you to see this through. Pieces of heaven